So let's actually start using the pen tool. We're going to start basic, just with some lines, and then from there we'll add in shapes and stuff like that. We're not going to do anything too complex. This is all very beginner level. So I'm going to start with just the pen tool. We can grab our pen tool from this shape section here. So here's the pen. I'm going to click the starting point and then the ending point, and then I'm going to press escape so that way I'm not trying to draw an additional point. Alright, so that's easy enough. We're going to do it again for this one. So starting point, ending point, press escape. Starting point, ending point, press escape. This line down here is perfectly straight. I'm going to take my pen tool again. And what I mean by perfectly straight, I mean they're all perfectly straight, but like it's not skewed at all. It is perfectly horizontal. And so how do we do that? We can try to eyeball it, but in this software, and in lots of them, if you hold shift, it will snap to either the cardinal or 45-degree directions, and then we can just click the endpoint there, and we have a perfectly horizontal line. Press escape, right? And then this last line, which has multiple points in it. So starting point, one of the midpoints, a midpoint of the remaining distance, the next midpoint, the next. There we go. Now I can press escape, and now that line is done. Now it's not perfect, but that's okay. I could go in here and I could modify these if I wanted to. I can click on this point and use my arrow keys to move it around. And double click this point too to get inside editable mode, and then click the point and then move it around, right? So you can do that too if you get a little off on it. You have to be a little careful when you're double clicking. Sometimes when you double click, depending on where you are, you might end up getting like typing inside of it instead. So just when you're double clicking, try to double click on the points, and that should allow you to edit them, move them around. On our next slide, we're going to play with curves and adding points. Now I've got two sets of lines here, and that might look a little confusing. I've got blue lines and green lines. Essentially, the blue lines are to represent where my line will be when I first end it, and if there's a green line, I'm going to modify that line to look like the green line. So grab my pen tool, here to here, I'm going to hold shift to make sure it's perfectly horizontal, and click, and then press escape, right? So now we have this line. Now if I double click on it to make it editable, and I see sort of in the middle here, I've got this dot, I can click and hold down, and I can drag that down here to make a curve. So now I've changed that starting line to end up where the green line is. We're going to do something similar with this line, but we're not going to modify it. We're going to make a curve with just the original line. So grab my pen, starting point. I'm going to try to get in the middle. This looks like around the middle-ish to me. So I'm going to click and hold. And now that it's jumped to sort of this curving angle thing, I can let go of the mouse, and I can figure out about where that goes, right? Right now I'm just moving the mouse around, and it's showing me where that line will end up whenever I'm happy with it. So I'm going to the end here, I'm going to click, and that finalizes the line. I can make more points if I want to, but I don't want to, so I'm just going to press escape. Now we've got this zigzag line, and we did that before, but we're going to start with this straight horizontal line and then make it zigzagged. So start with my pen tool, click here, hold shift to get a perfectly straight line, click there, press escape. So there's my starting line. Now I'm going to use these middle points like I pulled down that one. So I'm going to click here, right? I've got this one. I can bring it down here. Now it's curved and I don't want that. So I'm going to double click, and now it's a hard corner instead of a curve. I'm going to pull this one up to here. I'm going to double click to make it a hard angle. I've got this one here. I'm going to pull it down to this point. Double click. Pull this one there. Double click. Pull this one there. And double click. Right now on this one, I'm doing basically the same thing, but this time I want the curves. So get my pen tool. Starting point. Hold shift. Ending point. Press escape. I'm going to double click sort of around the middle-ish. There we go. I'm going to pull this down to about there-ish. I know that's not where it looks like it is, but it was basically the same line, but with curves instead. Now if I pull this one up to here, is that where it was? Yeah, about there. And I pull this one down to about there, and then this one up to there, and this one down to pretty close there. I can adjust these a little bit more to try to get a little bit closer to where it actually is, but you can see that I got it pretty close. There we go. That's pretty tough to understand exactly where those points are from that original curvy line. Because I made it earlier, I knew basically where they were, and I knew that it was basically the same thing as this, so I was able to remember it. Essentially, the points are about halfway between these curves, right? And that's okay. You don't have to exactly fully understand it, but hopefully you're getting a little bit of the hang of it. Now we're going to create some shapes with our pen tool. So I'm going to start with a square. This is what I'm going to start with, and then remember I'm going to end up with additional ones. So grab my pen tool. I'm going to start here. I'm going to hold shift to make a perfectly horizontal line, and I'm going to click. I'm still holding shift, so now I'm drawing downwards to make a perfectly vertical line. Still holding shift over this way and back at the starting point. There we go. So here is my square. It's not quite perfect, but it's pretty decent. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give it a fill color. So I'm going to click Format here. That gives me some colors. Right now I have no fill color. So let's go ahead and choose a color. Maybe I'll go with maybe an orange. Make that small. And now I'm not going to redraw these with the pen tool because I've already been using the pen tool and I just made a square. What's really that significantly different about drawing a rectangle versus a square? Instead, I'm going to copy this, Command C, Command V to paste. Let's put it there, and I'm going to make it larger with this handle. Okay? And then, oh yeah, you can see that that line was not perfect, was it? You can't really tell that much there, although I see it now that I can see that issue there, but for the most part, it's not too terrible. I could double click and grab this corner, and I could move that over a little bit using my arrow keys. Alright, Command V, and move it down here. Use this handle to make it taller. Grab my original again, Command C. Actually, I don't need to keep Command C because it's still on the clipboard. So I could just Command V as many times as I need without recopying, because just because I pasted doesn't mean that it's no longer on the clipboard. It's still there, right, because I'm making copies. So now grabbing this handle, I bring it down to here, and once again we can see that's a bit off. So if I double click over here, I can modify that corner to look better. Alright, so using those techniques that we've played with so far, let's go ahead and try to create a bar graph. So I'm going to start with my pen tool. I'll click, and I'll hold shift, and I'll click, and I'll keep holding shift, and I'm making the axes first. Okay, and let's color that maybe black. We can see that it's not perfect, right? I had some little bit of issues here and there, so I could double click. Oops. A little tough because where that little dot is, right? So, so Command Z to undo that. I can click and I can move these points around where I think it looks a little better. Alright, I think that looks okay. Maybe that one a little bit more. That looks okay. Alright, now I'm going to make these. Alright, so first one, holding shift, still holding shift. Alright, I can press escape to get out of it. Now I can see that these are not quite level, so I'm going to click on just this one and move it up a little bit. That looks pretty straight to me. Okay, click on the whole thing and move it around with the arrow keys to try to make it overlap correctly. I'm going to make my bar graph. Now I'm going to make them different colors. So this one can be red. I'm going to Command C and Command V to copy it and paste it. So now I will increase the size using this handle, right? And maybe this one's going to be orange, I'll paste another. I didn't need to recopy, right, because it's on the clipboard. Drag this one up, and this one can be pink. And paste one more time. Drag it up. And maybe this one will be green. Okay, so it's not quite perfect, right? I can see there's a little bit of issue down here at the bottom. So double clicking there, I can modify that point, right? And then I think they all need to go down a touch because I can see some blue, and some of these need to go over a little bit. This one I think isn't quite tall enough, so grab that handle again and grab that handle again. I think that looks pretty good. So there's our first part of trying out the pen tool. And the next one we'll do a little bit more playing with shapes and whatnot.